scored. Gold lead in League of Legends is a classic overlay asset. It's one that you'll always pretty much see, and they try to reference it from the casting crew repeatedly throughout the game, and usually they use it to suggest that a gold lead means that team is leading, and not just in gold, obviously, but in the sense that maybe they're controlling the game, they're in a favourable position, they're winning the game, there's almost an implication of momentum, or like they're building something, as you see the graph go up. The problem is, yes, context is sometimes given live during the game, but it's often very, very simple, or it's even just intuitive. Like, it doesn't feel like they're necessarily leading the game, or, it doesn't look, if you see, it doesn't seem like they're leading, though, if you look at where they're positioning on the map and how they're playing at the moment. There might be a bit of that, but it's very rare that you get the in-depth kind of analysis. You actually need to know what the gold lead means. So, in my opinion, I get it. Back in the day, it was actually essentially meaningful if someone had a gold lead. It isn't really in modern day League, this is why I make this video, but say you're talking about some time between definitely season 4 and season 5, maybe even up to season 6, I would probably say, a slight edge in the season 7, that's when we start to get more shaky. Say you had a 2 to 5k gold lead, especially if you're a very good team in the world, that could meaningly suggest you are ahead, you're in a winning or favourable position or setup, and the other team isn't just going to be able to play out the game at this pace in this kind of way. They're going to have to do something meaningful, otherwise you're going to have that slight edge or large edge at certain points in time, even with those low numbers. Those aren't the 10k gold or 8k gold leads you see thrown nowadays. There's obviously the famous line about the SKT team, the era when they had Bang, etc., where the line was like, I think if it was like 2k or 5k, but the idea was if you were like 2k ahead of SKT, actually it was even. And if you were like, or maybe it's the other way around, maybe if it's like 5k, it's actually even. But if you're 2k ahead, actually you're slightly behind, because they were just so good at punishing mistakes, vision control, coming back into a game, even knowing how to scale back into a game. And they would just win so many of those games, as any KT roster fan should know. But in the modern day, the gold lead can mean so little, or even worse, it can directly mislead. It's like that old classic saying, right? A man who doesn't read the newspaper is uninformed. The man who does read the newspaper is misinformed. Like, interesting statement, right? So part of the issues go like this. What if my team, I'm just going to say my team instead of one of the teams to make it simpler for you. What if my team in the pro match is scaling as a really good scaling comp? If I hit my comp and my comp scales properly, we're actually in a very good position if we're anywhere close in any of the other aspects. And so as a result, I'm mildly behind in this game, or maybe even. And there might actually, with where the game is at in this point in the game and how it's unfolded and how the other kills and all the rest have been distributed, maybe there's actually a limited window for my opponent and their champions and their comp where they basically must make plays, or they must win out these fights now. Otherwise, even without doing anything effectively, I'm just going to get into a stronger and stronger and stronger position. But the Gold League can't ever show that. The Gold League can't tell you that. So that's different from a game as well, where it's neutral, or I'm behind, but for real. Like, it's a neutral, as in like both teams have at this point in the game a very similar chance. There's no real like time conditions or windows at this point in time. There's no big power spikes coming up initially. Or I'm actually for real just behind in the game, where we both have similar comps, or maybe you are the one with the scaling comp and I'm behind as well. That should be extra stress, not just like, well, they're slightly behind in the gold at the moment. What if my team comp and my approach is super early game / lane focused? Well, in that scenario, the gold lead I might have is to be expected, and maybe even needs to be a big one to actually make it worth it, depending on what type of champions and comp I'm playing against. What if my team has a lead, but hasn't based yet, so they can't have spent the money, or has managed their basing quite poorly, has stayed on the map when they maybe shouldn't have, and now maybe he's going into a fight where that gold lead actually doesn't exist in any tangible sense in the game. It's just gold in the bank that cannot be spent and has not been spent or invested into the items. That's what you imply with the gold lead. The gold goes into items, which means stats, which means better stats, which makes the champion stronger, which makes the comp stronger. No, none of that's actually there. That's definitely not taking place, but it's hard to keep track of all the bases, right? In that scenario, my gold is basically meaningless, my advantage. It doesn't give me a lead. I can't use the lead that it should give me, because when I go back, I have to spend it, don't I? So if we fight now, your comp might even be better. Like, my carry might just have imaginary items he's about to get, but he doesn't have right now. I think, by the way, teams themselves in games don't keep track of that stuff enough. Like, they should be using that tactically. There's a premise in Counter-Strike I'll very quickly explain, which is, say we're in, like, a 3v3 situation, and your team's the terrorist team, and you get into the site and you plant the bomb. If I'm a CT at the defensive side and I see you going in there and I can even hear maybe you planting the bomb, sometimes actually it behooves me to take a fight immediately because that's actually not a 3v3. While you're planting the bomb, you're taking out the action for a second. It's a 3v2 and actually I can get an advantage. And if I can even trade 1-for-1 where it might be in a really positive situation going forwards, then think about the League of Legends kind of analogy in this sense. In this scenario, you might have a goal deal on me. Obviously, they don't see that on the screen, but you might have a sense of like, oh, they won that last fight or whatever. But if you notice that from ward placing, the jungler going around the map, if you see that they stay and they come for what would in theory be like just an easy dragon for you to take, maybe if they were basing, or they come for a dragon fight, maybe it's actually even then. So maybe that's actually a better fight to take because afterwards they're going to base anyway, or some of them are going to be in base if they're dead, and they're going to get the items as it is anyway. Then they're going to maybe have a lead over you. Sometimes I think teams don't even factor that in enough. So okay, let's go back to the whole angle of when we're looking at the game though. What if I am behind a whole bunch, gold, but I have dragons? And not only that, I have dragons that are favourable to my comp, and maybe that's even doing something to my comp that's one of the few things you don't want to happen. That puts you in a tougher situation, even though you have your 2k gold, 3k gold. Well, enjoy that gold. Like, how is that going to help you? I've got win conditions in this game, potentially. I've got the game itself giving me things that don't count in the gold sense, right? What if I've used heralds as part of my gold, like, a deficit? I've still used some of my heralds. Some of my gold came from taking the tower plates and taking towers. So I have actually the map maybe in a more favourable scenario, even though you won a bunch of fights and you've got more gold overall, or you got a bunch of shutdowns, bounties. What if the kills and the gold went to the wrong people? What if a tank jungler took the gold, or a tank top laner? What if the support took it instead of the ADC? And these kills could have gone on to a carry jungler, or a carry top laner, or a mid laner that's about to hit a power spike, an ADC that normally should be behind in lane but gets the 2 kills instead of the support. What if that's a totally different game? That gold actually is worth less for certain people and way more for others. And that is key for the context of this game and what the gold league actually means, basically. In what sense does it actually affect the game? Drives me wild, by the way, when I see top LEC and LCS teams fuck up handing over kills in scenarios where it's like 3v1s or tower dives where it's like, look, you're literally both able to auto attack him, just let that guy do it. Some of them they look like they actually greed and the support of the jungler just takes it. Other times they just look almost like noobs in fucking gold where everyone's just hitting everyone trying to get the kill. It's like, I can't possibly trust my team, everyone just hit everyone. Like, it's mental, because if you go and ever watch like the top Koreans, especially watch elite like solo queue, it's just expected you will know to give the kill to that guy. Sometimes, occasionally in pro play, their kill even gets away because actually it's just understood, like, right, the support's going to let me finish it. What the fuck are you doing? Like, and the support goes, well, I thought you were. That very rarely happens, but occasionally does. And I'd rather that, by the way, than continually give away way too many kills to the wrong pieces on your team that therefore don't really do anything in that particular regard, especially depending on what items they're going to go and buy with it. Oftentimes you want it to be fucking AD and AP that they're going and buying, isn't it? How about this? What if a guy with tons of gold needs to get to a later game item build than he's at now? Maybe it's only like 20 minutes, 15 minutes in the game. Or he has to hit a specific expensive item to make his champion really, really strong. Again, that's building towards what could eventually manifest as a lead, but it ain't a lead at this point in time. That's a way less tangible, way less necessary lead than the type of typical thing of like, this lead now means right now they're in a favourable position, right now they're in a winning position, they have an advantage that implies they can sort of, no, maybe it doesn't. So to me, I always thought a broadcast change they could have made is why not have 2 graphs? Why not have one like overall graph lead, but then maybe you can toggle to one that's like held item gold instead of total team gold. Like, how much gold's actually in the items? How much gold's in the items on each of the champions? What are the win conditions of this comp? Let's see if they're actually meeting that with their carries having the actual items in gold, not just in the bank or on another player. I would even say, by the way, I've always wanted them to do an overlay where they sort of tell me on the screen when someone's like, could go and base, like, oh, look, he's just coming up to a potential item spike. When he gets this second item, here's an AD. Like, no. We don't get that, but imagine if we did. Imagine how simple it would make it. Imagine how much it could potentially help even the commentators who are watching it. So actually, just like this video title, sometimes it isn't that you've got a gold lead. You've got a gold mislead. It'll actually throw you off to see that the team's got a gold lead. It'll give you a false sense of security that they're in a great position. It only works coupled with someone tracking what the expectations are for these comps, these champions, these power spikes, relative not only to the game, but then their opponent and the game state as well. Like, I actually think power spikes are way more interesting to talk about than the gold lead, by the way, when someone's going to have a position like that. I always thought in League of Legends, they should even have had maybe a special overlay and a timer, like roughly, it's probably going to be about a 10-minute item spike on this vein here before they can get it under control. That should be like a hockey power play. It should sort of define the way that the game's spoken about and your understanding. Like, right now is when they're really going to put the pressure on and do something with this, not just farm in lane. A League of Legends match has a chance to be so much more fun and delivered in such a more interesting and entertaining way, as it actually has a flow to it that other esports games don't. Like the way it goes from the very early game with some invades into like the laning phase, but then are they playing aggressively or are they farming? How much roaming's happening? How's the jungler and the support interacting? Then which dragons? Or do you swap for their herald? Do you basically try and cross? Like basically if you do it well, this can actually be like different sections of the game. We're transitioning between them. We're talking about, well, this was an advantage here, but it's not going to be as much here. It's like the flow of a tennis match where they have like the serving, then you have the tiebreakers, or, roughly this guy's behind the game, so he's got to break him at some point. It actually gives a flow to the game that you always know where you're at and you have a sense of like what he's doing and how good it is. It's not just people, good shot. Not as good a shot. No, it's not like that, is it? It's not that situation. Also, like, he's leading he's up one game, he's got the lead. It's like, well, yeah, it's his service game, wasn't it? Like, the other guy has a chance to just equalise it now and then. It's just moot, isn't it? So, even though he hasn't yet. So, to me, I think the problem here is the broadcast doesn't understand maybe even that flow of the game. And as a result, they're not able to surf that wave. And instead, they enforce concepts, static concepts, at all points of a game. And they don't always understand how to break out that and talk about the transition points between different phases of the game. Especially now the concept of like late game doesn't mean the same as it used to mean. Now, quite frankly, I think one of the most interesting things they could tell me on screen, or a guy who's a caster, I'd love it if they did this, was if you can identify for me right before they have key fights towards the end of the game, if actually one of the teams can win the game outright, if they wipe the opponent team, or how about if they kill a certain key carry that needed for wave clear or to fight and still have a chance in a 4v5 or a 3v5 later if they're at the base. I've always thought League of Legends should have a third person on the TriCast. They should do TriCasts rather than just duocasts. But that person is only there for nerd shit like this. And they don't talk often, but they just come in when there's a chance and they give you some of this context. And they'll just be tracking all these things. They can maybe even be tracking timers of things like, his flash is going to come up soon, so let's see if they get aggressive here. And then the commentators just do their shit. I've always thought this could make this game so that you still get all the noob stuff where they're like, oh my God, what's he doing here? He's in the bramble bush. Like, you can have all that jazz, but you also can deliver for the real nerds, the hardcore, the people who are the esports people going, this is what I want. Because you get some of that on the core streams, but even then they're watching it in a more relaxed fashion. They're not trying to like track this stuff as much. So I think it's one of the most missed and misleading elements of League of Legends professional esports. This video was kindly supported by Lager15, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Skaparen, Travis Goff, Zack Schmidt, Adam Ochs, Alexander Rao, Animosity, Bot Pounder 420, Chris, Hades, Jdubs, Jensen Goh, John Shelton, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and as always, a special thanks goes out to both Jerky's Minion and DZL. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to ask a question for my monthly AMA? Want teasers for upcoming content or interview guests have I done, etc.? Do you want to take part in one of those donated discussions? Well, if you want any of the above and previously mentioned, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scroomalati today at the description box link to Patreon.